sterile scent of antiseptic, the hushed urgency of wheeled gurneys, the vulnerability of the human body laid bare. Hospitals, arenas of healing, yet sometimes theaters of unimaginable dread. Welcome, seekers of uneasy truths, to Nightmare True Horror. Tonight, we pull back the surgical drapes on 7 true tales, where the promise of care became a harbinger of fear. What unsettling whispers have you overheard in those quiet, sterile halls? Share your own medical misgivings in the comments. And if the thought of what can go wrong when life hangs in the balance quickens your pulse, ensure you are subscribed. Prepare for procedures that defy explanation, and remember, the most chilling diagnoses are often delivered when you're at your weakest. Listen closely. The doctor will see you now. I've always had a complicated relationship with hospitals. As a former nursing student who switched to medical journalism, I know enough about medicine to be perpetually anxious, but not enough to be truly confident. So when my doctor found gallstones during a routine ultrasound, I approached my scheduled laparoscopic surgery with equal parts resignation and dread. Nothing to worry about, Dr. Keller assured me during my pre-op consultation. Gallbladder removal is one of the most common procedures we perform. You'll be in and out in 2 days. I believed him. After all, Riverside Memorial was the crown jewel of our city's healthcare system. A gleaming complex of glass and steel, with state-of-the-art equipment and specialists poached from prestigious institutions across the country. Their surgical complication rate was well below the national average, a statistic I'd cited in an article just last year. The morning of my surgery passed in a blur of consent forms, vital sign checks, and the peculiar vulnerability of hospital gowns that never quite close in the back. The anesthesiologist had kind eyes above his mask as he inserted the IV. "Count backward from 10, he instructed. I made it to 7 before darkness claimed me. I woke to the rhythmic beeping of monitors and the distant squeak of rubber-soled shoes on linoleum. My mouth felt like it had been stuffed with cotton, and a dull ache radiated from my abdomen. Not sharp pain, just the sensation that something inside me had been rearranged. A nurse with graying hair checked my vitals, her movements efficient but gentle. "Everything went perfectly," she assured me. "We'll move you to a room shortly for overnight observation." My semi-private room on the 5th floor had a decent view of the city skyline. The other bed was empty when I arrived, but within an hour, orderlies wheeled in my roommate, a middle-aged woman named Diane, who'd had her appendix removed that morning. "Never felt pain like that in my life," she told me, wincing as she adjusted her position. "Doctor said it was nearly ruptured. Lucky they caught it in time." We bonded over hospital jello and complaints about the impossibility of finding a comfortable position with abdominal incisions. Diane was a kindergarten teacher with a dry sense of humor that made the hours pass more quickly. By evening, we'd settled into the strange intimacy that comes from sharing space during vulnerability. Around midnight, something changed. The monitors connected to Diane began beeping more rapidly. She stirred restlessly, her forehead beaded with sweat despite the room's chill. "Something's wrong," she mumbled, her words slurring slightly. "I don't feel right." I pressed the call button, my own discomfort forgotten. Within minutes, 2 nurses rushed in, their earlier casual demeanor replaced by tense efficiency. They checked Diane's vitals, exchanging concerned glances before one hurried out to make a call. "What's happening?" I asked the remaining nurse, a young man whose name tag read Eric. "Just a post-op complication," he replied without meeting my eyes. "Nothing to worry about." But the arrival of Dr. Mercer, the senior surgeon on call, suggested otherwise. He examined Diane quickly, his face growing more concerned with each passing moment. "Get her to ECU," he ordered, and paged Dr. Winters immediately. As they prepared to move Diane, her eyes found mine, wide with fear. "This isn't normal," she whispered. "Something's not right." They wheeled her away, leaving me alone with a lingering scent of antiseptic and sweat. Sleep was impossible after that. My own incision sites began throbbing with a strange, insistent pain, different from the expected surgical discomfort. Each heartbeat sent a wave of pressure against the 4 small punctures where the laparoscopic instruments had entered. Around 2 a.m., I heard urgent voices in the hallway outside my door, which had been left slightly ajar. Dr. Mercer and unrecognized were speaking in hushed but intense tones. "This is the third case this month," the unknown doctor said. "We can't keep explaining away organ failure in otherwise healthy patients." "The tissue doesn't match the donor database," Dr. Mercer replied. "It's like the organs came from nowhere, or somewhere off the books," the other doctor suggested, voice dropping even lower. "The East Wing surgeries are all being performed by the same team," Dr. Mercer continued. "We need to." A nurse approached, and they immediately fell silent before moving further down the hall, beyond my hearing. My mind raced with confused possibilities. Organ failure? Donor database? Diana had come in for a simple appendectomy, not a transplant, and my own surgery had been a routine gallbladder removal. At least that's what I'd been told. I pressed my hand gently against my abdomen, feeling the small bandages covering the incision sites. The pain had intensified, pulsing in a way that felt wrong. Gathering my courage, I peeled back the edge of one bandage and was immediately struck by how the incision looked different from what I'd expected. Slightly longer, the edges more ragged, as if something had been inserted rather than removed. But there was something else. A smaller incision, lower on my abdomen, that hadn't been mentioned in my pre-op consultation. It was about 2 inches long, neatly stitched, and angrier looking than the others. Sleep was impossible after that. I spent the night researching on my phone, reading about surgical complications, organ transplantation, and black market organ trafficking. The articles described sophisticated criminal networks that harvested organs from unwilling donors in developing countries. But this was Riverside Memorial, not some back alley clinic. It couldn't be happening here, could it? Morning rounds brought a new doctor I hadn't met before. Dr. Winters, the one they'd paged for Diane's emergency. She was younger than I expected, with sharp features and calculating eyes that evaluated me clinically. "How are you feeling this morning?" she asked, checking my chart with unusual attention. "Fine," I lied. "How's Diane?" "My roommate." Something flickered across Dr. Winter's face. Annoyance, concern. "She stabilized?" she replied curtly. "We're running tests." As she examined my abdomen, her touch lingered near the unexplained incision. I winced involuntarily. "Pain here?" she asked, pressing again at the same spot. "Yes, that incision wasn't mentioned in my pre-op consultation." Dr. Winters made a note in my chart, her expression unreadable. "Sometimes additional access points are needed during laparoscopic procedures. Nothing to worry about." But there was plenty to worry about. After she left, I pulled out my phone again, this time to look up Dr. Winters herself. Her credentials were impeccable. Harvard Medical School surgical residency at Johns Hopkins, specialized training in transplant surgery. But there was something else. A 3-month gap in her CV 2 years ago, following her departure from a hospital in Chicago. No explanation given. I needed to see Diane to find out what was happening. Once the nurse finished my morning check and left, I carefully disconnected my IV and slipped into the hallway, using my IV pole for support. The ICU required a keycard for entry, but a distracted staff member held the door as I approached, assuming I belonged there. The ICU was a different world, hushed, intense, with a constant symphony of life support equipment creating an eerie backdrop. I found Diane in a corner bed, surrounded by machines. Her skin had a grayish tinge, and her body looked somehow deflated, as if something essential had been removed. A chart hung at the foot of her bed, and I quickly scanned it. My 2 years of nursing school providing just enough knowledge to understand the terrifying truth. Diane was in multi-system organ failure. Her body was rejecting what the chart described as a partial liver graft, a procedure she'd never consented to, certainly not one that would have been performed during a routine appendectomy. A noise behind me made me turn. Dr. Vinta stood in the doorway, her expression a mix of anger and resignation. "You shouldn't be here," she said quietly. "What did you do to her?" I demanded, keeping my voice low. "She came in for an appendectomy." Dr. Winters glanced around to ensure no one was within earshot. "You need to return to your room. Now. Not until you tell me what's happening." What did you put inside me? My hand pressed against the throbbing incision site. Something in her face changed. A calculation. A decision being made. Come with me. She led me to a small consultation room and closed the door. For a long moment, she simply studied me, as if assessing how much to reveal. Riverside Memorial has a waiting list of over 300 patients needing organ transplants, he finally said. Many will die before receiving one. The system is broken. So you're what? Harvesting organs from routine surgery patients? The words sounded absurd as I spoke them. Not harvesting. Sharing. Dr. Winters leaned forward. The human body has redundancies. Excess capacity. A portion of liver here. A small piece of kidney there. Taken from healthy patients who will regenerate the tissue. Given to those who would die without it. Horror crawled up my spine. Without consent. That's assault. Criminal. It's innovation. She countered. Dr. Keller pioneered the technique. Micro-harvesting, we call it. Minimally invasive, nearly undetectable. The donors recover fully, never knowing they've saved a life, except when they don't, I said, thinking of Diane. When something goes wrong. Dr. Winters' expression hardened. Complications are rare. Diane had an undiagnosed condition that made her incompatible. We're correcting the issue. And what did you take from me? I pressed my hand against the throbbing incision. A small portion of your left kidney. You'll never miss it, and a child in renal failure will live because of it. The room seemed to spin around me. I gripped the edge of the table for support. I want to see my medical records. All of them. Now. That would be unwise, Dr. Winters said, her voice dropping. For everyone involved. The threat was implicit but clear. I thought of the hospital's reputation. The prestigious careers. The political connections. Who would believe my accusations against such an institution? I'll go to the media, I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. With what evidence? Your medical records will show a routine gallbladder removal with no complications. She stood straightening her white coat. And should you persist, there are other ways to handle problems. Medication errors happen. Post-surgical infections can be deadly. I left the consultation room on shaking legs, my mind racing. I needed evidence, something concrete to prove what was happening. But how? My phone had captured nothing but the sound of our conversation. Damning, but not definitive without context. Back in my room, I found Eric, the nurse from last night, changing my IV bag. Something in his expression caught my attention. A flicker of guilt, perhaps, or concern. How's Diane? I asked casually. His hands paused momentarily. Stable, he said, not meeting my eyes. Did you know about the micro-harvesting program? The IV bag slipped from his fingers, splashing saline across the floor. I don't know what you're talking about, he whispered. But his face told a different story. People are being harmed, Eric. Diana didn't consent to having part of her liver removed. He glanced nervously at the door. Keep your voice down. They monitor these rooms. Who does? Hospital security. Eric knelt to clean up the spilled saline, his voice barely audible. Not security. Dr. Keller's team. They call themselves the Transplant Innovation Group. Been operating for 2 years. 20 surgeons, a dozen nurses, key administrators. You're part of it, not by choice. He rolled up his sleeve, revealing a jagged scar. I found out by accident. Threatened to report them. Woke up missing part of my liver. His eyes darted to the door again. They'll discharge you tomorrow. Once you're out, go to St. Mary's Hospital across town. Ask for Dr. Patel. Tell her Eric Anguian sent you. She's been building a case. Before I could ask more questions, the door opened. Dr. Keller, my original surgeon, entered, his smile not reaching his eyes. How's our patient today? He asked, as if nothing were amiss. Eric mumbled something about checking other patients and hurried out. Dr. Keller watched him go, expression calculating. You seem to be recovering well, he said, reviewing my chart. We'll discharge you tomorrow morning. Looking forward to it. I lied. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every footstep in the hallway, every beep of a monitor set my nerves on edge. I kept thinking about Diane, about Eric's scar, about the child supposedly receiving part of my kidney without my knowledge or consent. The ethical complexities made my head spin. Was saving lives worth violating others? Who decided which patients deserved to receive and which to give? Around 3 a.m., my door opened quietly. I tensed, expecting Dr. Winters or perhaps hospital security. Instead, Eric slipped in, carrying a thumb drive. "Patient records," he whispered, pressing it into my hand. "Proof, surgical logs, tissue typing data, financial transactions. Everything Dr. Patel needs. Why are you helping me? Why are you helping me?" "Because my sister was on the transplant list for 3 years," he replied, his voice tight. "She received a miracle match 6 months ago. I was so grateful until I started noticing patterns. Now I can't sleep knowing what her life cost." A noise in the hallway made us both freeze. Footsteps approached, then passed. Eric exhaled shakily. "They're watching you. Dr. Winters flagged your chart after your conversation. You need to get out of here tonight." "How?" "Security. I've disabled the alarm on the east stairwell. It leads to the loading dock. There's a shift change at 4 a.m. That's your window." After Eric left, I dressed quickly, wincing at the pain in my side. The thumb drive felt heavy in my pocket, weighted with secrets that could bring down the hospital's reputation and dozens of careers, but also potentially save countless future victims. At 3:55 a.m., I slipped into the hallway. The nurse's station was empty, the night staff likely taking a coffee break before the shift change. I made my way to the east stairwell, each step sending jolts of pain through my side. The door opened silently, just as Eric had promised. I descended 5 flights of stairs, pausing on each landing to catch my breath and listen for pursuers. The loading dock was deserted when I reached it. The large roll-up door closed, but a smaller side door propped open slightly. Eric's work again, I assumed. Outside, the night air was cool against my skin. I hurried across the parking lot, keeping to the shadows, expecting at any moment to hear shouts behind me, but none came. I reached the main road and flagged down a passing taxi, giving the driver the address for St. Mary's Hospital. Dr. Patel was a small, intense woman with decades of experience etched into her face. She listened to my story without interruption, examining the incision sites with professional detachment before reviewing the files on the thumb drive. "This is worse than we suspected," she said finally. "We've had 6 patients transferred here from Riverside with unexplained post-operative complications in the past month alone. 3 died before we could stabilize them. Will you help me report this?" She nodded grimly. "I have contacts at the medical board and the FBI. This goes beyond malpractice. It's organized criminal activity." The investigation moved quickly after that. FBI agents interviewed me extensively, photographing my incisions and taking custody of the thumb drive. Medical records were subpoenaed, hospital staff questioned. Dr. Keller and Dr. Winters were placed on administrative leave pending investigation. 3 days after my escape, I received a text from an unknown number. "Diane didn't make it. Be careful." A week later, Eric disappeared. His apartment was found empty, his car abandoned at the airport. The official theory: he had fled to avoid prosecution for his role in the scheme. I knew better. The media coverage was explosive. Organ harvesting ring at prestigious hospital dominated headlines for weeks. Dozens of former patients came forward with stories of unexplained complications and mysterious secondary incisions. The hospital's board of directors claimed ignorance, pointing fingers at rogue surgeons acting without oversight. Eventually, 14 medical professionals were indicted, including Dr. Keller and Dr. Winters. The trial revealed the full scope of their operation. Over 200 unwitting donors over 2 years, with harvested tissue going to wealthy private patients who paid handsomely to skip the transplant waiting list. The Transplant Innovation Group had amassed millions in offshore accounts. Justice was served, at least on paper. But some wounds don't heal completely. 6 months later, my incision has faded to a thin white line. Medical tests confirm that I'm missing approximately 15% of my left kidney. Not enough to impact function, just as Dr. Winters had claimed. Sometimes I wonder about the child who received it. Did they survive? Are they thriving with a piece of me inside them? I'll never know. I still work as a medical journalist, though now I specialize in patient advocacy and healthcare ethics. My experience gave me a unique perspective that editors value, but it also left me with a lingering paranoia that medication can't touch. Because the true horror isn't just what they took. It's realizing that those we trust most can violate us at our most vulnerable. It's knowing that beneath the sterile surface of respected institutions, beneath the practiced smiles and reassuring words, something monstrous may be operating, and that the next time you're wheeled into an operating room, you might wake up with less than you had before, or with something new and dangerous growing inside you. The most terrifying thought of all, Riverside Memorial was just one hospital. How many others have similar programs, hidden behind credentials and confidentiality? How many other doctors are weighing lives against ethics, deciding who deserves to give and who deserves to receive? I may never know, but I check my body for new scars every morning, just in case. The drip of hospital pipes still haunts me, that rusty smell of bleach and despair. I'm 24, living in a new town now, working retail to escape the nightmares of St. Mercy General. Back then, I was a rookie nurse in that small Wisconsin hospital, fresh out of school, thinking I'd save lives. But by my third week, I saw the pattern in Nurse Caldwell's smile. God, that smile still chills my blood. Nobody believed me, not until the bodies piled up. St. Mercy General was all flickering fluorescence and stale coffee, the kind of place where the night shift felt like limbo. I started in October, still botching IVs, my hands shaky but eager. The 7th floor was quiet. Chronic cases, DNR patients, the occasional code blue. I liked it, the calm, sketching wildflowers in my notepad during breaks. But then I noticed room 307, Mr. Alvarez, lung cancer, DNR. Dead at 2:14 a.m. Room 412. Mrs. Keene, kidney failure, DNR. Gone at 2:14 a.m. Same time, same floor, same nurse. Caldwell, the hospital's angel, always on duty. Nurse Caldwell had 20 years under her belt. Her scrubs crisp, her banana bread a potluck staple. She knew every aide's birthday, her laugh warm like a mom's. But I saw her slip out of room 219 the night Mr. Hart coded, his DNR barely signed. Her shoes squeaked down the hole. Humming, "You Are My Sunshine," her hands reeking of lavender sanitizer, and something sharp, metallic, like blood. My pulse spiked, the tick of the wall clock too loud. I told myself it was coincidence, overwork, but my gut whispered trouble. I mentioned it to Dr. Patel at rounds, my voice low. He adjusted his stethoscope, shrugging. DNRs die. Rachel, Caldwell's a saint, held my wife's hand through chemo. His dismissal stung, but I nodded, the metallic smell lingering in my nose. That night, a snip woke me from a nap in the break room, like scissors closing. I checked the hall. Empty, but room 219's door clicked shut. Caldwell's humming fading. My heart thudded, reason battling intuition. She was just checking charts, right? A week later, I found 5 scalpels missing from the supply closet, their slots empty. My hands shook as I pulled records. 12 ENRs in 6 weeks, all on Caldwell shifts, all with spiked potassium levels, no tox screens done. The hum of the vending machine felt mocking as I stood there, coffee cup trembling. I checked a biohazard bin, stupidly desperate, and found a syringe. Not broken, a drop of clear liquid inside, glinting like poison. A clang rang out, metal shelves rattling. Caldwell stood in the doorway, smiling, her eyes too bright. "Night shift's rough, dear," she said, voice soft. "You look haunted." I couldn't shake it. The syringe, her smile. Room 305, Jenny Cole. 16 leukemia, full code. She was my patient. Her mom always praying at her bedside. I checked Jenny's A4 bag one night. The label smudged. The fluid inside thick, oily, not saline. My breath caught. The beep of her heart monitor speeding. Beep, beep, beep. I yanked the line, calling a rapid response. Jenny's mom sobbing. Is she next? The team stabilized her, but I heard a whisper as I left. Careless. Caldwell's voice. From the shadows. Her lavender scent choking me. I searched Caldwell's locker, heart pounding. My phone camera ready. Inside photos, dozens taped in rows. Patients laughing, screaming, all dated, labeled Mercy Achieved. A list. Names in her neat script. Mine circled in red. My throat tightened. The click of my camera loud. I ran to Dr. Patel, showing him. But he frowned, paging security, his voice tight. Stay calm, Rachel. Calm? The beep of a code, blue blared. Room 219, Jenny's room. I sprinted, finding Caldwell. Syringe in hand. Jenny's a four-line, dripping that oily fluid. They're suffering, Caldwell said. Calm, her smile serene. We ease their pain. Join us. Her words were a knife. Her motive clear. A twisted mercy, deciding who lived, who died, playing God to end suffering. I lunged, shoving the crash cart, the crash of metal waking Jenny's mom, who screamed. Caldwell grabbed my wrist, her grip iron, but I kicked free. Security bursting in, their radios crackling. She didn't fight, just smiled, humming as they cuffed her. Police found potassium chloride vials in her car, enough for dozens. The news called her the Angel of Death, guilty of 23 counts of manslaughter. I quit, moved away, tried to forget the beep, the lavender. But last week, I pulled a double at a new hospital, covering a friend. At 2:14 a.m., a code blue rang. Room 307. Empty, the bed made, no patient logged. My phone buzzed. A photo from a block number. Me, asleep in the break room, my face circled in red. The senders had glitched, but I swear it read, Caldwell. I smashed my phones, changed my locks. But every drip in the walls, every whiff of lavender feels like her. Her syringe still full, her mercy still hunting me. The hospital's hum can't drown her hum, that smile. I'm safe, they say, but Caldwell's out there, her list unfinished, my name still circled. Working nights at County General was never glamorous, but it paid the bills. I was an overnight nurse in the ER, used to chaos and emergencies, but nothing, not even gunshot wounds or car accidents, prepared me for the fear that crept in the night I learned about the janitor's secret collection. His name was Harold. He'd been at the hospital forever, quiet and a bit off. He never said much, just shuffled along the hallways, mop dragging behind him, eyes downcast. Nobody ever gave him a second glance. He was invisible, and that's probably how he liked it. At first, I just thought he was awkward, harmless, maybe lonely. But soon I noticed things, little things that added up to something deeply unsettling. Harold was always lurking around the ER waiting room, lingering near the curtains where grieving families waited for news. He hovered in the shadows, almost as if he was waiting for something, watching. Then patients started noticing personal items missing. A gold necklace from a woman brought in after a fall. A watch from a car accident victim. A family photo vanished from a bedside table. Small things easily dismissed as lost in the chaos. But it happened often enough that whispers started. Still, nobody suspected Harold. After all, who notices the janitor? One night, around 2 a.m., the ER was quiet. I was exhausted on my third coffee break. Walking down the hallway to the staff lounge, I heard rustling from the supply closet. Harold's supply closet. Curiosity pricked at me. I'd never seen inside. Harold guarded it fiercely. But tonight, the door stood slightly ajar. I glanced around quickly. The hallway was empty, heart racing. I pushed the door open just a bit wider and peered inside. The smell hit me first. A sickly sweet mixture of disinfectant and decay. My stomach turned. Inside, illuminated by a single bare bulb, were shelves cluttered with small boxes and Ziploc bags. Stepping closer, I saw labels scribbled in shaky handwriting. Names and dates. Something twisted coldly in my gut. Opening a box, my breath caught. Inside were trinkets, a silver bracelet, a ring, a faded photograph. Another bag contained locks of hair, carefully tied and labeled. Dread pooled in my stomach. Harold wasn't just stealing things. He was collecting them like trophies. Suddenly, the hairs on my neck prickled. I turned sharply. Harold stood in the doorway, eyes dark, unreadable. He stared silently, gripping his mop handle tightly, knuckles white. I was just looking for supplies, I stammered, backing slowly away. His lips curled into a thin, unsettling smile. His cheeks curled into a thin, unsettling smile. You shouldn't have opened that. My blood ran cold. Before he could move, footsteps echoed down the hall. A doctor approaching. Harold stepped aside, letting me slip out, but his gaze never left mine, cold and threatening. I couldn't sleep after that night. Paranoia crept into every shift. Harold watched me constantly, his eyes never blinking, always waiting just beyond the light. I couldn't prove anything. I had no evidence, only my terrified suspicions. Then a patient went missing. An elderly man, confused and vulnerable, vanished from his bed late one evening. Authorities searched everywhere. Nothing. Harold volunteered quietly to help, shuffling around with his mop, face expressionless. My gut twisted. I knew deep down Harold had something to do with it. 2 nights later, I stayed late, pretending to finish paperwork. The ER was empty, lights dimmed. Harold moved quietly toward the basement storage room, carrying a large garbage bag. Pulse pounding, I followed at a distance, creeping silently down the stairwell. I found him in the dimly lit storage room, hunched over something wrapped in plastic on the concrete floor. My breath froze when I saw an elderly man's hand protruding from beneath the wrapping. My knees nearly buckled. Harold whispered softly to himself, carefully placing a small personal item, a pocket watch, into a labeled box. My stomach churned violently. He stood suddenly, head cocked as if sensing me. I bolted, feet pounding up the stairs, gasping for air. Panic surged as I dialed 911, voice shaking, whispering frantically. But before I finished the call, footsteps echoed behind me. Harold stood blocking the hallway, mop handle raised like a weapon, eyes glinting dangerously. You shouldn't interfere, he hissed softly, stepping closer. Adrenaline took over. I turned, sprinting toward the ER. He lunged, grabbing my arm roughly. I screamed, thrashing violently, managing to wrench free just as flashing red and blue lights flooded through the windows. Police stormed in seconds later, guns drawn. Harold dropped the mop handle, expression blank, unresisting as they cuffed him. The hospital was swarmed with officers. They uncovered Harold's hidden collection, boxes filled with personal items and locks of hair from patients spanning decades. His quiet, unnoticed presence had allowed him to stalk, collect, and eventually escalate to murder without suspicion. In the weeks following his arrest, I learned more. Harold had no family, no friends. His only joy coming from his grim collection. Police connected him to multiple unsolved disappearances of vulnerable patients over the years. He'd hidden in plain sight, using his invisibility as a janitor as cover. I quit soon afterward, unable to shake the feeling of dread that lingered in those hallways. Nightmares haunted me. Visions of Harold's cold, unblinking stare, his twisted collection waiting silently in that locked closet. Now, years later, hospitals still fill me with dread. Every janitor cart makes my pulse quicken. Every closed door brings a sick twist to my stomach, because Harold taught me something terrifying. Sometimes, the scariest monsters are the quiet ones, the ones we never even notice. I'm 30, a mechanic in a sleepy Pennsylvania town, the kind where everyone's got a pickup and a diner order. For weeks, I'd been feeling off. Dizzy spells, my hands shaking, a burning in my chest like I'd swallowed coals. The local doc sent me to St. Agnes Hospital, a gray, sprawling building that smelled like bleach and regret. After a battery of tests, the specialist, Dr. Marrow, called me in. His eyes were cold, like polished glass, and his diagnosis hit like a gut punch. Chronic vitalis syndrome, he said, a condition I'd never heard of. rare and terminal. His treatment plan was a series of injections starting that night, but his smile didn't reach his eyes, and the syringe he held glinted like a threat. My gut screamed this wasn't about healing. People checked into St. Agnes, but some never checked out. The hospital room was sterile, the fluorescent lights buzzing like angry wasps. My IV drip swayed, casting a shadow that twisted on the wall. Dr. Marrow's visit left my skin crawling. His voice too smooth, his hands too steady, as he prepped a syringe filled with a cloudy liquid. I asked what it was. Medicine, he said, but his eyes darted to the door. My chest tightened. I told myself it was just nerves, but as he left I heard a lock click, soft but deliberate. That night, the ward was too quiet, the usual beeps and chatter gone. A faint moan drifted from the next room, cut off abruptly. My heart thudded. I slipped out of bed, my bare feet cold on the tile, and peered through the door's window. The hallway was dim, but a shadow moved at the far end, tall and hunched, pushing a gurney that creaked like old bones. My breath caught. The gurney was empty, but a dark stain glistened on its surface. I started noticing things. My chart left on the counter had scribbled notes. Subject 47, viable. Viable for what? I'd Googled chronic vitalis syndrome on my phone. Nothing. No record, no studies. My hands shook as I hid the chart under my pillow. At midnight, a nurse I didn't recognize came in, her face half hidden by a mask, her eyes avoiding mine. She prepped another syringe, but the label was scratched off. I faked sleep, my pulse hammering, and she left without injecting me. The next day, I asked my friend Mike, a delivery guy who'd dropped off supplies at St. Agnes, to dig into the hospital's rep. He texted back, heard rumors, Pachensko in, don't come out. Check the basement. My stomach churned. That evening I saw Dr. Marrow again, his cold eyes scanning me like I was meat. He mentioned phase 2 of treatment, a procedure in the basement. His pen tapped the clipboard, a rhythm that matched my racing heart. I couldn't stay. At 2 a.m., I pried off my IV to sting sharp as I crept to the door. The hallway was empty, but a faint hum came from below, like machinery grinding. I found the stairwell, its walls streaked with rust, or something darker. Each step echoed, my sneakers squeaking on the damp concrete. At the basement door, a keypad glowed red. I hesitated, my breath shallow, then heard footsteps behind me, heavy and slow. I ducked into a supply closet, the smell of bleach choking me. Through the crack in the door, I saw Dr. Marrow pass, his coat stained with something red, a scalpel glinting in his hand. My knees buckled. The hum grew louder, joined by a wet rhythmic thump, like meat being sliced. I waited, heart slamming, until his footsteps faded. The basement door was ajar now, a cold draft carrying a metallic tang. I slipped inside, my phone's flashlight trembling. The room was vast, lined with steel tables, some draped with tarps. One tarp moved. A faint twitch, and a muffled whimper escaped. My blood froze. I lifted the edge, revealing a man, strapped down, his eyes wide with terror, a gag in his mouth. My phone slipped, clattering to the floor. Footsteps rushed toward me, and I ran, my lungs burning, back up the stairs. I burst into the lobby shouting for help. A security guard grabbed me, but I showed him the video I'd recorded. Blurry, but enough to show the man, the tables. Cops swarmed the hospital by dawn. They found the basement room, empty now, but with traces of blood and sedatives. Dr. Marrow was gone, his office cleared out. Records showed dozens of patients diagnosed with vitalis syndrome, most missing, their files erased. The cops think he was harvesting organs, selling them on the black market, targeting those with no family to notice. I'm back home, but I don't trust doctors now. My hands still shake, and I check my windows every night. Last week a letter arrived, no return address, just a single line in neat handwriting. You were viable. I burned it. But I still hear that basement hum in my dreams. Marrow's out there, and I know he's still looking for subjects. The dare seemed harmless enough when Trevor suggested it during our lunch break at the medical supply warehouse. $20 says you won't spend an hour in the old Mercy General wing, he said, grinning around his sandwich. The condemned section they've had sealed off for 3 years. I'm Alex, 24, and I've been working at Med Supply Direct for 6 months. The job was supposed to be temporary while I figured out what to do with my life. But the pay was decent, and my coworkers were cool. Trevor, Mike, and I had become close friends, always looking for ways to make our mundane warehouse shifts more interesting. That place gives me the creeps, Mike said, shaking his head. My sister used to work there before they shut it down. Say weird things happened on the night shift. What kind of weird things? I asked. Lights staying on in empty rooms, equipment turning on by itself, patients complaining about procedures they never had done. Trevor rolled his eyes. Hospital urban legends. Come on, Alex. Easy $20 for sitting in an empty building for an hour. The truth was, I needed the money. My car payment was due, and I was already behind on rent. $20 might not sound like much, but when you're living paycheck to paycheck, every dollar counts. Mercy General sprawled across 6 city blocks, a maze of connected buildings that had grown organically over decades. The main hospital remained operational, but the East Wing had been condemned after budget cuts and structural issues. Chain link fencing surrounded the entrance, topped with razor wire and danger. Do not enter signs. I met Trevor behind the building at midnight. He'd already cut through the fence. Security patrol comes by every 2 hours, he said, checking his watch. You've got plenty of time. The loading dock door had been pried open, its lock broken and hanging loose. Inside, my flashlight beam revealed a typical hospital hallway. White walls, gray linoleum floors, and that distinctive antiseptic smell that never quite goes away. The silence was absolute. No humming fluorescent lights, no beeping monitors, no distant conversations. Just the sound of my footsteps echoing off empty walls. I walked past abandoned nursing stations, their computers dark and covered in plastic sheeting. Patient rooms stood open, their beds stripped bare. Everything looked normal for a closed hospital wing. Until I reached the end of the main corridor. A newer-looking door blocked the hallway, painted industrial gray with a keypad lock. Strange. Why would they install security on an abandoned wing? I tried the handle anyway, expecting it to be locked. It opened. Beyond the door lay another corridor, but this one felt different. The air was warmer, and I could hear a faint electrical humming. My flashlight revealed fresh scuff marks on the floor and recently cleaned walls. Someone had been using this section. Common sense told me to leave immediately, but curiosity won out. I followed the corridor deeper into the building, past rooms with modern equipment still in protective plastic. At the far end, light spilled from beneath a pair of double doors marked R7. I pressed my ear against the door. Silence. But when I pushed it open, my blood ran cold. The operating room was fully functional. Bright surgical lights hung over a steel table, and monitors displayed vital signs for a patient who wasn't there. The smell of disinfectant was overpowering, mixed with something metallic that made my stomach turn. Dark stains covered the floor around the operating table, stains that looked suspiciously like dried blood. Fresh blood. Surgical instruments lay scattered on a nearby tray, still wet with red residue. On a desk in the corner sat a leather-bound logbook. With shaking hands, I opened it and began to read. Subject 47. Experimental cardiac bypass without anesthesia. Patient expired after 47 minutes. Subject 48. Neural pathway reconstruction. Subject showed unexpected resistance. Sedation increased to lethal levels. Subject 49. Organ viability testing. Multiple extractions performed on conscious patient. Page after page of surgical procedures described in clinical detail, all performed on unidentified subjects with no names, no medical histories, no consent forms. The dates went back 6 months and continued through last week. The most recent entry made my knees weak. Subject 52, scheduled for tonight. Young male, approximately 24 years old. Acquired through warehouse connection. 24 years old. My age. That's when I heard them. footsteps approaching from the corridor I just walked down. Slow, deliberate, wearing what sounded like surgical shoes against linoleum. I killed my flashlight and crouched behind the operating table, heart hammering so loud I was sure whoever was coming would hear it. The footsteps stopped just outside the doors. "I know you're in there," a calm voice said. "Trevor told us you'd be coming tonight." The doors swung open, and bright hallway lights silhouetted a tall figure in scrubs. Dr. Elizabeth Vance, according to the name tag, I could see as she stepped into the room. Her gray hair was pulled back severely, and her pale eyes scanned the space with predatory efficiency. "You've read the logbook," she said, spotting it open on the desk. "How inconvenient." Behind her, 2 orderlies entered, large men who looked more like security guards than medical staff. One carried a syringe filled with clear liquid. "The research we're conducting here is vital," Dr. Vance continued, pulling on latex gloves, experimental procedures that the medical establishment is too timid to approve. "We need test subjects who won't be missed." "Trevor set me up," I whispered, the horrible truth sinking in. "Trevor has been very helpful in identifying suitable candidates. Young people without strong family ties, working dead-end jobs, struggling financially. People like you." She nodded to the orderlies, who began moving around the operating table toward my hiding spot. I bolted for the doors, but one of them caught my arm with crushing force. The syringe came toward my neck, and I did the only thing I could think of. I screamed. Not a quiet cry for help, but a full-throated, blood-curdling shriek that echoed through the empty hospital corridors. Dr. Vance winced. "Soundproof the room better next time," she told the orderlies. But my scream had an unexpected effect. Somewhere in the distance I heard voices, security guards responding to the noise. Their flashlight beams appeared in the corridor outside. The orderly with the syringe hesitated, looking to Dr. Vance for guidance. That split second was all I needed. I twisted free and ran, pushing past the startled doctor and sprinting toward the voices calling out in the hallway. "Security! Help me!" Officer Maria Santos had been patrolling the hospital grounds for 2 years. But she'd never had someone come running out of the condemned wing covered in blood and babbling about illegal surgeries. It took 3 hours and a full police investigation to convince anyone I wasn't having a psychotic break. By the time the raid team entered /7, they found it spotless. The blood had been cleaned up, the equipment removed, and the logbook was gone. Dr. Vance and her team had vanished without a trace. But they found other evidence. Financial records hidden in a wall safe showed payments to Trevor for procurement services. Security footage revealed him bringing 5 different people to the loading dock over the past 6 months. People who'd never been seen again. Trevor was arrested at his apartment, along with forged medical credentials and detailed files on potential victims. He'd been targeting co-workers and acquaintances who fit Dr. Vance's profile. Young, isolated, desperate for money. During questioning, he maintained he'd only been paid to bring people to the building. He claimed he didn't know what happened to them afterward, but the evidence suggested otherwise. Bank deposits matching the dates of disappearances told a different story. Dr. Vance was never found. The surgical equipment was traced to black market dealers, but the trail went cold. Investigators believe she's still operating somewhere, probably in another abandoned facility, still conducting her research on unwilling subjects. That was 8 months ago. I've moved to a different city, changed jobs twice, and sleep with my bedroom door locked every night. But I can't shake the feeling that I'm still being watched, still being evaluated as a potential subject. Sometimes I get calls from unknown numbers. No one speaks, but I can hear the faint beeping of medical equipment in the background before they hang up. The $20 Trevor offered was never about money. It was the price he'd been paid to deliver me to that operating room. I was never meant to walk out of that building alive. I learned that desperation makes you vulnerable in ways you never expect. That trust can be weaponized by people who see others as nothing more than raw material for their experiments. And I learned that some abandoned places aren't really abandoned at all. They're just waiting for the next victim to walk through their doors, thinking they're safe because the building looks empty. The condemned wing of Mercy General was demolished 4 months ago, but I drive by the empty lot sometimes. Construction crews are building a new apartment complex on the site. I wonder if they know what happened in that basement level they never found. If they realize they're building over rooms where people disappeared into surgical nightmares that medical ethics boards would never approve, and I wonder if Dr. Vance is still out there somewhere, reading the news about young people who've gone missing, taking notes for her next research project. Because predators like that don't just stop. They find new hunting grounds, new accomplices, new ways to acquire the subjects they need. If someone offers you easy money for doing something that seems too simple, ask yourself why they need you specifically. Ask yourself what they're really buying. Sometimes the answer is more terrifying than you can imagine. I'm 35, a procurement officer at Mercy General, a sprawling hospital in a mid-sized Michigan town. My job's mundane, tracking supplies, ordering Eiffel drips, signing off on shipments of bandages and drugs. But for months, I've noticed holes in the inventory. Vials of fentanyl, surgical kits, even defibrillator pads vanishing, marked as lost or damaged. At first, I thought it was sloppy paperwork, but the numbers didn't add up. Thousands of dollars worth, gone. Last week, I found a locked storage room in the hospital's basement, its door scratched like someone forced it open. Inside, a single syringe lay on the floor, unlabeled, next to a crumpled delivery manifest with my name on it. My gut churned. This wasn't just theft. Someone was running a black market, and they knew I was onto them. The hospital's fluorescent lights buzzed like dying insects, casting long shadows in the supply room. My flashlight caught the syringe's glint, its needle bent like it'd been used in a hurry. My hands shook as I pocketed the manifest, the paper crinkling too loud in the silence. I told myself it was a mistake. Someone reused my name, a clerical error, but my pulse hammered as I locked the door behind me, the basement's chill clinging to my skin. Back in my office, I cross-checked the manifest. The listed drugs, morphine, ketamine, matched the missing inventory. My throat tightened. I emailed my supervisor, Karen, a nervous woman with a habit of avoiding problems. No reply. That night, as I left the hospital, a black SUV idled in the staff lot, its windows tinted, engine growling softly. My steps faltered. I swore I saw a face inside, watching, but the headlights flicked on, blinding me, and it peeled away. The next day, I found a note slipped under my office door. "Stop digging," scrawled in red ink, the letters jagged, like written in a rage. My stomach dropped. I showed it to Karen, who laughed it off, her eyes darting to the window. "Just a prank," she said, but her hands twisted her pen until it snapped. I didn't buy it. That evening, the security cameras in the supply wing went offline for an hour. No explanation. I started noticing patterns. Missing drugs were always high value, easy to sell. Painkillers, sedatives, equipment vanished right before audits, replaced with cheap knockoffs. I kept quiet, but my car's tires were slashed in the hospital lot. The cuts too clean to be random. My heart raced as I walked home, the streetlights flickering, a faint scrape of footsteps trailing me in the dark. Late one night, I stayed to check the inventory logs. The hospital was a maze of empty halls, the air thick with antiseptic, and something sour, like decay. A low hum came from the basement stairwell, rhythmic, like a machine running. My hands sweated as I crept down, the stairs creaking under my boots. At the bottom, the storage room door was ajar, a faint light spilling out. My breath hitched. I peered inside. A man in scrubs stood over a crate, packing vials into a duffel bag. His face was shadowed, but his hands moved with precision, gloved and steady. Another figure, a woman, counted cash, her nails clicking on a clipboard. My phone buzzed in my pocket, loud enough to make me flinch. The man's head snapped up, his eyes locking on the door. I ducked back, my heart slamming, and ran, the hum chasing me up the stairs. I hid in a janitor's closet, the smell of bleach choking me. Footsteps echoed outside, slow and deliberate, stopping inches from the door. My hands trembled as I clutched my phone, the screen showing a text from an unknown number. "You saw too much." The footsteps moved away, but a metallic clank rang out, like a lock being forced. I waited, lungs burning, until silence returned. I reported it to the police the next morning, showing them the note, the manifest, my slashed tires. They searched the basement, found the crate, empty, but traces of fentanyl residue. The hospital's records showed a nurse, Daniel, with a history of disciplinary issues, and a security guard, Lisa, who'd been signing off on lost shipments. Both were gone, their lockers cleared out. The cops suspected an organized ring, siphoning drugs to dealers, using the hospital as a front. Patients had died, overdoses, botched surgeries, linked to missing supplies. I quit Mercy General, moved to a new city, but I don't sleep. Every delivery truck, every stranger in scrubs feels like them. Last week, a package arrived at my apartment. No return address. Inside was a syringe, empty, with a note. "We know where you work." My hands shook as I burned it, but the smell of bleach lingers in my dreams. Daniel and Lisa are still out there, and I know they're not done stealing. Working dispatch for Metro Emergency Services isn't glamorous, but after 12 years behind this console, I've heard every kind of human crisis imaginable. Heart attacks, car accidents, overdoses, domestic violence calls. They all blur together into a symphony of sirens and static. But last night's call was different. Last night, something went wrong in a way that still makes my hands shake when I reach for the radio. It started routine enough. Unit 47, Tommy Vasquez and Sarah Chen, two of our most experienced paramedics, received a priority transport at 11:47 p.m. Critical patient from St. Catherine's emergency room to Mercy General's trauma center. The patient was a 26-year-old male, unconscious, unidentified, found beaten nearly to death behind a warehouse downtown. St. Catherine's couldn't handle the severity of his injuries. I logged the transfer request, confirmed the route, and watched Unit 47's GPS blip move steadily across my screen toward Mercy General. Tommy's voice crackled through the radio every few minutes with vitals updates. Patient stable but critical, ETA 12 minutes. Standard procedure. At 12:03 a.m., Tommy's final transmission came through. Dispatch, Unit 47, arriving Mercy General Trauma Bay. Patient packaging for transfer now. Copy that. 47. Good work. That should have been the end of it. Tommy and Sarah would hand off the patient, complete their paperwork, and return to service. I turned my attention to other calls, managing 3 other units responding to various emergencies across the city. But Unit 47 never returned to service. At 1:15 a.m., I tried raising them on the radio. Nothing. Their GPS signal had gone dark at Mercy General. Not unusual if they were in the hospital's basement trauma bay, which was notorious for blocking signals. I waited another 30 minutes before calling Mercy General directly. "This is Metro Dispatch checking on a patient transfer from Unit 47. Should have arrived around midnight." The charge nurse sounded confused. "We haven't received any transfers tonight from Metro. Are you sure they came here?" My stomach dropped. "John Doe, mid-20s, severe trauma from St. Catherine's. Negative. No patients matching that description. No ambulance arrival since 9 p.m. I hung up and immediately called St. Catherine's to confirm the transfer. They verified everything. The patient, the destination, Unit 47's departure time. But somehow, an ambulance carrying a critical patient and 2 veteran paramedics had vanished between hospitals. I dispatched Unit 52 to Mercy General immediately. They found nothing. No sign of Unit 47. No record of their arrival. The hospital's security cameras showed clear footage of the trauma bay entrance from midnight to 1 a.m. No ambulances appeared. At 2:30 a.m., I called Tommy's cell phone. Straight to voicemail. Sarah's too. Their families hadn't heard from them since their shift started. I felt ice forming in my stomach as I contacted our supervisor and initiated emergency protocols. By dawn, police had issued a bolo for Unit 47, the ambulance. A 2019 4D series with full emergency equipment had simply disappeared. So had Tommy Vasquez, a 15-year veteran and father of 3, and Sarah Chen, who'd just gotten engaged last month and was studying for her nursing degree. The investigation moved quickly but led nowhere. GPS tracking showed Unit 47 traveling the expected route from St. Catherine's, then going dark at coordinates that placed them in Mercy General's parking lot. Traffic cameras along the route confirmed the ambulance's passage, until it reached a 3-block dead zone where city cameras had mysteriously malfunctioned. On the second day, police found Unit 47. It was parked in an abandoned lot 12 miles from Mercy General, stripped of all medical equipment. The interior had been thoroughly cleaned with industrial-strength bleach. No fingerprints, no DNA evidence, no trace of Tommy, Sarah, or their patient. The discovery raised more questions than answers. Who had the expertise to disappear an ambulance and its crew so completely? Why target this particular patient? And most disturbing, how had they known the exact route and timing? I spent sleepless nights reviewing dispatch logs, looking for patterns. That's when I noticed something chilling. Over the past 18 months, 6 other ambulances from various services had gone temporarily dark near the same 3-block area. Each time lasted only 10 to 15 minutes, short enough to be dismissed as radio dead zones or equipment malfunctions. But now I wondered if something more sinister had been happening in those missing minutes. I brought my findings to Detective Morrison, a lead investigator. He listened with growing concern as I outlined the pattern of signal interruptions. "You think someone's been intercepting ambulances?" he asked. "I think someone's been shopping," I replied. "Testing responses, timing routes, identifying vulnerabilities." Morrison's face darkened. "You're talking about an organized operation. I'm talking about human trafficking, organ harvesting, or worse. Critical patients, often unconscious and unidentified, make perfect targets. Who would know to look for them?" The investigation expanded to include federal agencies. What they uncovered was worse than my darkest suspicions. A trafficking ring had been operating for years, using inside information from hospital staff to identify vulnerable patients, homeless individuals, undocumented immigrants, anyone whose disappearance wouldn't trigger massive searches. Corrupt EMS and paramedics would create diversions during transfers, delivering patients to illegal medical facilities, where they'd be harvested for organs or sold into slavery. Tommy and Sarah had stumbled into something they weren't supposed to see. They'd been murdered for being honest. The patient they were transporting was never found. DNA evidence later identified him as Miguel Santos, an undocumented worker whose family had already given up hope of finding him alive. 7 people were eventually arrested, including 2 EMTs from competing services, and a nurse from Mercy General who'd been providing patient information. The ring had operated across 3 states, disappearing hundreds of vulnerable people over the past decade. Tommy's body was found in a quarry 40 miles north of the city. Sarah's remains were discovered in a different location entirely. Both had been killed execution-style within hours of their disappearance. I testified at the trials, describing the pattern of signal interruptions and the night Unit 47 vanished. The defense attorneys tried to paint me as a conspiracy theorist, but the evidence was overwhelming. 5 defendants received life sentences. 2 others accepted plea deals in exchange for information about the network's broader operations. I still work dispatch, but everything feels different now. Every transfer request makes me wonder who might be listening, who might be watching, who might see an opportunity in someone else's suffering. I track every ambulance obsessively, noting any gap in communications, any deviation from expected routes. Because the most terrifying truth I learned is that predators don't just hunt in dark alleys or abandoned buildings. They infiltrate the systems meant to save us, wearing uniforms and badges, speaking the language of help while planning harm. Tommy had a photo of his kids taped to his dashboard. 3 smiling faces that remind me why this work matters. Sarah kept motivational quotes on her phone, dreaming of a future that was stolen from her along with her life. Sometimes, late at night, when the radio is quiet, I can almost hear their voices calling in from Unit 47, reporting their arrival at a hospital that never received them. A final transmission from the space between helping and harm, where good people disappear and evil wears the mask of mercy. The official case is closed, but I know the network was larger than what we uncovered. Somewhere, other ambulances are going dark. Other patients are disappearing. Other Tommy and Sarahs are being silenced for doing their jobs with integrity. And somewhere in the city, A dispatcher just like me is watching a GPS blip move across their screen, unaware that it's heading toward a destination that doesn't exist. A place where ambulances arrive but never leave, where the siren's wail becomes a scream that no one hears. Last week I got a new radio code I'd never heard before, Code Black. When I asked what it meant, my supervisor's face went pale. Hopefully, he said, you'll never need to know. But I think I already do. It's the code for when the helpers become the hunted, when the system meant to save lives becomes the mechanism for taking them. It's the code for when trust becomes the most dangerous thing of all. The monitors fall silent, but the disquiet remains, a phantom ache. 7 glimpses into the shadows that can lurk beneath the white coats and sterile masks. Did any particular story touch a raw nerve, a fear of helplessness? The true horror, often, is the betrayal of trust in places dedicated to preservation. Which chilling account will keep you wary of your next checkup? Offer your thoughts, your own chilling encounters with the medical unknown, in the comments. Your case files are welcome here. If these tales of institutional dread have left you unsettled, subscribe to Nightmare True Horror and like this video. Until the next emergency code signals a fresh nightmare, may your recovery be swift, but perhaps always get a second opinion.